Hello everybody, welcome back to Tech Talk. If you've been paying attention at all recently, you've probably noticed that the cost of PC parts has absolutely exploded. Now, I'm stuck in a situation like a lot of folks where I have to build a new PC for my wife, one that's Windows 11 compatible, and you may be surprised to learn that in researching how to go about doing this, I decided that AM4 is still the best value platform for building a PC in 2026. Because let's face it, if you have a regular home or office PC, you don't need the latest and greatest and fastest stuff. So I discovered that by shopping wisely, buying some older parts that are for the AM4 platform, and by reusing what I can actually get a significant upgrade on my wife's PC, get it Windows 11 compatible without spending a whole lot of money. We're going to look at how I did that. We're going to look at what's causing this huge rise in PC parts prices coming up right now, right here on Tech Talk. So I think I can probably hear a lot of people groaning right now saying, oh, here goes Graham harping on about AM4 again. He's such an AM4 lover. Well, bear with me. There is a thought process and a method to this particular madness and why I'm building yet another AM4 PC. And I think by the time we get to the end of this video, you may agree that this was the best option open to me. So hang out for that. Now this is going to be a two-part series. This video we're looking at the strategy and the parts list for putting together this new PC for my wife. In part two, which will be a future video in the near future, we're going to be looking at assembling that PC in a brand new mini-ITX case and then putting it through its paces to see what this ultra-budget combination of new and used parts is capable of. But before we even start into any of that, we should probably talk about why PC parts are so expensive now. If you haven't been paying attention to the tech news, you may be unaware, but the bottom line is the giant tech companies have been so desperate to roll out AI models, and they're expanding their artificial intelligence capabilities so greatly that they are hoovering up all of the memory chips basically that are available out there. And they're willing to pay big, big money to do so. Because these huge tech companies are willing to pay a fortune on memory chips, companies that make these chips are kind of neglecting the retail market, and they're focusing more of their manufacturing capacity toward the AI space, leaving shortages for those of us that want to build retail PCs. Now, of course, inflation is affecting everything. We've seen GPU prices rise, we've seen PSU prices rise, cases are getting more expensive. But when it comes to two things in particular, SSDs and memory, those have really exploded. And let me give you an example. Let's take a look at some recent purchases that I made. Now here's a purchase that I made in March of 2025, so it's not even a year ago. I bought, what did I buy? I bought 16 gigabytes, so two 8 gigabyte sticks of 3200 megabytes DDR4 Patriot Signature Line Series RAM. That cost me $37.79 Canadian. So 16 gigabytes, a DDR4 was $37.79 Canadian. That exact same RAM kit from the exact same seller, I bought it direct from Patriot via Amazon, is now $159.99 Canadian. The price of that RAM has gone up more than 4 times. So it has really exploded in cost, and that's pretty typical. We're seeing that across any kind of RAM that you want, whether it's DDR4, DDR5. It's all gotten very, very expensive in the last few months because of the shortages of chips. And you might be saying, oh, well, that's probably inflated because DDR4 is old, nobody's buying it, they're running out of stock, you'd probably be better off with DDR5. Well, interestingly enough, I did go take a look for DDR5 RAM. The cheapest DDR5 I could find on Amazon in Canada is this Patriot Viper Venom. So it's again 2 by 8 gigabytes for 16 gigabytes in total, and it's $300 Canadian. Now this was by far the cheapest RAM I could find on Amazon. Every other 2 by 8 gigabyte set that I could find was up around the $400 or $500 mark. Don't know why this one's so cheap. I know it's not the fastest RAM in the world, but it is significantly less expensive than anything else I could find. Looking at Amazon.com, the American Amazon, it's the same thing. 2 by 8 gigabytes of DDR5 is costing about $300 US. So they're not getting any breaks down there either. So you can see from $37 paying for 16 gigs of RAM less than a year ago, that same kit is now $159. If I wanted to upgrade to something similar in DDR5, I'm looking at double that again. I'm now looking at $300 best case scenario. So to go from 16 gigs of DDR4 to 16 gigs of DDR5, you're looking at what, 9 times the cost or 8 times the cost? It's a pretty crazy growth in price for memory that we've seen. But that gap between DDR4 and DDR5 RAM, where you're basically paying, double or more, is pretty significant. If you're shelling out $300, $400, $500 for memory, just for memory, by the time you add a motherboard, a CPU, a GPU to your computer build, man, that's going to be an expensive computer. So you can see just how much costs have risen. And it's not just RAM that's been the problem. If we look at this, this is my receipt for buying a 512 gigabyte Patriot P300 PCIe Gen 3 NVMe drive. I paid $49 for that. That exact same drive, again from the same seller on Amazon Canada, is now $107.99. So the NVMe drive's more than double in price again. So everything's gotten expensive, but especially SSDs and especially memory. And here's the thing about those two things. You can't build a computer without them. It's not like a GPU where you can say, with a GPU you can say, oh, well, I'll just use integrated graphics until prices come down. But without your drive and without your memory, you can't assemble a computer at all. So you're pretty much stuck paying these prices if you want to build a new PC. And there's just no alternative to it. So for folks that are moving from Windows 10 to Windows 11 and they need a computer that's now Windows 11 compatible, this seems like kind of an insurmountable cost. Something that's going to get very, very expensive if you want to build that new PC. And of course, even if you want to buy a PC from somebody like Lenovo or Dell, the costs for these parts are rolling into those pre-built PCs, so you're not going to get a break either. So the question is, how do we get around that and build a PC on the cheap that can move us from Windows 10 into Windows 11? So in looking to build a budget PC like this, there's one rule that reigns supreme above all, and it's a rule that a lot of people miss. And that is you have to build for your particular use case. So what does that mean? Well, it means you don't look at shopping for a PC based on a spec sheet. You don't shop for a PC or build a PC based on what some YouTube guru says, sorry. You don't build it based on what some gamer tells you absolutely need, otherwise you're a loser. You have to build it according to what you're planning to actually use the computer for. And that means if you're not into gaming, you're not into content creation, but you are into office applications, you are into email, you are into browsing the web, you are into playing media, to making Zoom calls, to doing maybe some printing for documents or a little bit of light graphic design, just that general home office stuff, it doesn't take a ton of computer. You don't need 64 gigabytes of RAM. You don't need a blazing fast, enormous GPU that eats a ton of power, and you don't need a CPU that can run the space shuttle program. Boy, I'm dating myself as a space shuttle, aren't I? But you get the idea. You don't need all that stuff. All you need is to spend as little as you can to get something that feels responsive and quick, that runs cool and quiet, that fits in with your office, because sometimes offices have cramped space like my wife's, so you need something that fits the office space. And most of all, it's got to be affordable. And here's the thing, you can do that, you can accomplish all of that without spending tons of money. Now you may be asking me, Graham, yeah, but I am a content creator, I am a gamer, etc., and I'm sorry, for those of us that are into that, if you're building a new PC, yeah, it's going to cost you, especially right now. But this video is really addressing those with more average needs, the home and office needs that don't eat up a ton of computer resources. And the way you avoid spending more than you absolutely have to is through a couple of strategies. The first thing is reuse what you can, what it makes sense to reuse from your computer that you already have. Then spend money only on the things that actually matter and on things that will affect the performance that you'll actually feel when you go to use that computer. So what then is my strategy for this new build for my wife? Well, let me introduce you to her old computer. This is a Dell. It's got a Intel Core i5-6500 CPU in it. Now, the interesting thing about this computer, she's never complained about it being too slow. So it's got the i5-6500, it's got 8 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM running at 2133 megahertz, and she's always found it plenty adequate. The problem that we have, of course, if it's not Win 11 compatible, the copy of Win 10 on here expired some time ago. She also, even though it's a small form factor PC, she finds it takes up more room on her desk than she'd like. She'd like something a little bit smaller, and that's really her only ask. Win 11 compatibility, a little bit smaller. She's not asking for a whole lot more horsepower because for what she does, which again is just regular office work, she doesn't really need it. So what am I going to do here for her needs? Well, there's not a whole lot in these Dells that I can use, and it is one of the downsides of buying these refurbished machines like I did for this one. The case is proprietary, the power supply is proprietary, the motherboard is proprietary, so all that stuff you can't really use in another PC build. They're pretty much Dell specific. But what this does have is it's got DDR4 RAM, 8 gigs, 2133 megahertz. I'm going to take that out of here and I'm going to reuse it. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, 2133 megahertz, that's pretty slow RAM. You know, a more modern processor is going to want faster RAM than that. And I would totally agree if this was for content creation or gaming. But again, when you're doing office work, when you're doing Zoom, when you're browsing the web, using media, fast RAM isn't going to make an enormous difference. I'm going to tell you the CPU we'll be using in a bit, and it would do better with fast RAM, but for what she's using, again, the difference isn't enormous. The other thing I'm going to take out of here is the drive. This has a relatively fresh, it's got that Patriot P300 512 gig NVMe drive that I showed you earlier that I paid for last year. So we're going to take that out of here and we're going to put it in our new build. So the two most expensive things right now, the drive and the memory, I can actually recycle from this old PC and use it in my brand new AM4 build. So that's going to save me a ton of money. And for what my wife's doing, it's going to work great. Now, if I'm keeping the memory and the SSD out of this old computer, what am I doing for new parts? Well, let's take a look at that. So the first new part I got is the processor I'm going to be using, and this is an AMD Ryzen 5 3400G. Now, why did I choose this particular part? Well, yes, it is an older processor. This is brand new. I didn't buy it used. But being a 3400, it's, you know, a number of generations old now. But here's the thing. My wife has never complained about the speed of this computer for what she uses it for. When we look at Passmark software and I compare the Intel i5 6500 in here with this Ryzen 5 3400G, this CPU is about 80% faster than this one. So this has got a whole lot more performance, and it's performance that even she doesn't really need, so why would I buy anything more? I could have got a much more modern Ryzen 5 5600 GT. It would have been way more powerful yet, but it was double the cost, and like I say, for what she needs, she'll probably never notice the extra speed. So this Ryzen 5 3400G, that cost me a grand total of $117.24 Canadian. If you're in the States and you go on Amazon, you can get the same processor for $81 US. So that's the processor going in my new PC. Now that processor needs a motherboard to go with it, and so what I ended up getting was this ASRock A520 mini-ITX AC motherboard. Now this is a mini-ITX motherboard. Mini-ITX generally costs more than ATX or micro ATX. And the reason I was willing to pay it is, like I said, my wife's got a pretty cramped office. She wants a small footprint PC. That's going to be a very small footprint. I can put it in a mini-ITX case. It'll keep her happy. It's pretty much the cheapest mini-ITX motherboard I could find. It'll do everything she wants again. And that motherboard was $147.14 Canadian. It's available in the States on Amazon at $99.99. So a solid budget motherboard to go with that Ryzen 5 3400G. Oh, and I should mention too, the other reason I chose the 3400G is that it's got integrated graphics. Because of my wife's use case, she does not need a discrete graphics card. The graphics on these Ryzen 5 3400G are quite good. They're excellent for media. They're excellent for office purposes. It'll do everything that she wants and more, and it saves me the cost of having to buy a discrete graphics card, which would then also require a bigger case than the one that I ended up getting. So the question is, what case did I get? Well, what I got was the InWin BQ656 mini-ITX case. And I know it's still in the box. I hate opening my cases because I have a bad habit of losing parts before I assemble it. So this is what the case looks like when it's all put together. It's a very small case. It just fits the motherboard and the CPU, and that's about it. There's no room for expansion cards, etc. But again, for my wife's use, she's never going to need an expansion card. She's never going to need a GPU. For her, her number one issue is the size, and the size she's going to love. Now, this case comes, it's a mini-ITX case. It comes with a 200 watt 80 plus gold power supply included. It's $151.53 here in Canada, $99 in the United States. So another good budget part. The last thing I bought was a cooler. Now I could have used the stock cooler with this Ryzen 5 3400G, but I know in this particular case, you have to take the shroud off the cooler and modify it, and it's kind of ugly, and then it's like right up against the lid on the case. And I'm not a huge fan of AMD coolers, simply because I find them a little bit noisy, not great for cooling. So I went with my favorite. I'm a huge fan of Thermalright products. I've got a ton of Thermalright fans. They've always been great for me. They've been quiet. They've lasted for a long time. They work really well. So I bought and they're really affordable. I bought a Thermalright AXP90 X47. It's a 47 millimeter high cooler, so it's a low profile cooler. This cost me $29.09 here in Canada. In the States, they're $22.90. For that little amount of money, it's a great upgrade to cooling over a stock cooler. So where do I end up? So I've got my case, I got my motherboard, I got my CPU and cooling fan, I've got my drive and memory out of here. That's basically everything I need to assemble a computer. My total cost here in Canada was exactly 445 Canadian. Now, when you think about it, 445 Canadian is about what I'd have to spend to buy 16 gigabytes of decent DDR5 RAM alone. So by building AM4 and using AM4 memory with AM4 parts, basically I've saved myself a fortune. This whole thing together is going to cost what a decent 16 gig kit of DDR5 RAM costs. So way, way cheaper, obviously, than building a new AM5 platform PC. So 445 Canadian was the total cost. In US, if I bought all this stuff off of Amazon US from the same sellers, it would have cost me $302.89 American. So budget, budget, budget. The thing about it is, once I get this all together, it is going to be totally Windows 11 compatible. It's going to be a lot faster than her old computer, even though she doesn't need it. She's going to be kind of future-proofed for future applications that may need a little more horsepower. The only thing that's going to be a little bit of an issue is that 8 gigabytes of 2133 megahertz RAM. I would rather she have 16. Ideally, it would be a little bit faster, but I think given the kind of work that she does for the time being, it's plenty. It'll work just fine. I don't think it's going to cause her any frustrations. And it's going to save me a ton of money while RAM prices are high, high, high. So we're going to go with that for now, see how she works. So why does the strategy of using reused parts and older AM4 new parts make sense right now? Well, first of all, I really want to drive home. I'm not suggesting this is the only way to go about it. I'm sure lots of people will say, Graham, this is the dumbest thing you've ever done. You should have done this other thing. And those ideas aren't wrong. There's more than one way to skin a cat, pardon the expression. There's tons of different ways of doing things, but for what I want and for what my wife wants, this was the best option open to me, and it was an option that didn't cost me a fortune. And this makes sense for a whole lot of reasons, because I've been watching folks on YouTube who are doing PC building, etc., and they're not the big channels, the big channels like Jay's 2 Cents or like Gamers Nexus. They got tons of money. I know they're feeling the pinch of high costs, but let's face it, they can continue building no problem. It's the smaller YouTubers like myself that don't have tons of money. They're really feeling the pinch. I've seen a few of them saying, hey, look, on this channel, you're not going to see us building PCs so much anymore because it's just gotten too expensive. We can't afford to do it. Even guys that are rebuilding PCs for folks are saying, when I have to put in a new SSD or I have to put in new memory, suddenly the computer costs more to put together than people are willing to pay, and I totally get that. It makes sense. But for us as end users, so you're not doing it to resell, etc., you just need to get a computer that meets your needs, that's compatible with current operating systems. This strategy makes sense when prices are really high, because the fact of it is, a lot of computers, most computers have things that you can recycle. Power supplies, if you're not using a huge graphics card, power supplies haven't really changed. Like I mentioned, this case is a 200 watt 80 plus gold power supply. Well, for this setup, because there's no graphics card, 200 watts is plenty. This is a 65 watt CPU, so I have tons of overhead. 200 watts isn't a problem. So ATX, especially ATX power supplies, and ATX power supplies and ATX power supply, they haven't changed much in 30 years. So power supplies can be reused. Cases can be reused. As we're seeing here, SSDs and memory can be reused. And often they can be reused for many, many years over many different generations of computers. And by reusing parts like cases, power supplies, memory, and your SSDs, what it means is you save money to spend where it counts. You can spend it on, an upgraded motherboard, something that's more modern. You can spend it on the upgraded CPU that's more powerful. You can spend it on cooling so that your system runs cool and quiet. It saves money to put toward those things that you're actually really going to feel the difference. And it kind of avoids that trap, especially when you're really focused, when you start your build by saying, look, what do I really need this for? And then refusing to build it for anything other than what you need it for. It kind of saves you from that trap of spending money on things you don't need. And a lot of people say, oh, well, you want to future-proof. And that's true. Like, you don't want to build a PC that barely meets your needs today, but you also don't want to be silly and think, oh, I'll have this computer 20 years from now and I need it future-proof for something I'll be doing 20 years from now. Computers generally just don't last that long. If what you're doing is largely home and office apps today, 5 years from now, home and office apps aren't going to be a whole lot different. They're just not. They're not going to take tons and tons more, computing power to run. So putting together a mix of old and new parts like this to build a budget PC, for my wife, I'm pretty sure she could use this PC for 6, 7, 8 years and she's not going to have a problem with it. It's already, even though it's a budget build, it's more horsepower than she really needs. So I guess my advice would be, if you're kind of stuck in the same situation, you got an old Win 10 PC, you need to upgrade it so it's Win 11 compatible, or you just got an old and tired PC, think about what can be recycled, and then think about, maybe parts that are a few generations old make more sense. Now, I bought all new parts for this build, but you could also look at buying used parts off of eBay. But the key is really focus on, what am I needing? Like, how much computer do I really need? That will save you a ton of money because you're just building what's fast enough, what's modern enough, and then what's affordable enough for your own budget and for your needs. And that's kind of how you get through the high cost of PC building today. So that's pretty much a wrap for part 1 of this 2-part series. What do you think? I'm sure some of you out there are going to be thinking, no, you wasted your money, this is stupid, you should have done the other thing. I would love to hear your comments down below. Because like I say, I am totally open to the idea that there are tons of different ways to do things. They're going to be right for different types of people. Let me know what you think. In part 2, we're going to put all this stuff together. I'm going to show you what it looks like. I'm going to do a review of this InWin BQ series case. And then we're going to put this little computer through its paces and see what kind of performance we get for spending as little money as possible on these parts. So stay tuned for that. That's going to come up in the very near future. Now, if you appreciated this video, if it was helpful for you, or you just found it a little bit entertaining, don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That helps me out a ton. Hit the notification bell if you'd like to get notifications on future videos. And in the meantime, I'll look forward to seeing you next time.